Political commentator Adam Schwarz. Adam, very good morning to you. It's been sort of quite, I suppose, entertaining for a political commentator to watch all of this and all of the mudslinging back and forth. Do you think that the relationship between the two individuals is irreparable now?
I think it largely is just due to the nature of the conflict and the kind of level of ferociousness that's taken place. But, really, this is a kind of fracturing that's been predicted really from when they first formed their alliance beginning or at the middle of last year. I think it's sort of been increasingly inevitable just due to their kind of volatile personalities, but also due to the fact that, Elon Musk has always been kind of a ideological misfit within Trump's MAGA movement, but also I think crucially due to the fact that Elon Musk has faced, very considerable challenges and actually failures from his brief stint in government. He's faced a global consumer boycott of Tesla, and he's kind of been forced into a situation where he's had to kind of fabricate the successes he's had in Doge. So I think, he's an individual who's realized that this is a relationship and a kind of association that is no longer conducive to his interests. But I think, as you mentioned, the sort of speed of escalation and the ferociousness has really taken many people by surprise, even reportedly from inside the White House. These two were on TV in the Oval Office singing each other's praises, really, 5 days before this all kicked off. So for Elon Musk to, mention these accusations of Trump being somehow implicated in the Epstein files is very, very serious. And I think that specific accusation is something that will kind of prevent full reconciliation if the two ever really want it. But I think it's kind of also worth kind of reflecting on the ultimate nature of this relationship that they've had for under a year. This was always a kind of merger of government with private interests, which many people considered sort of largely inappropriate in a liberal democracy where you want to keep those two separate because ultimately government power should not be used to protect the private interests of individuals. And I think Elon Musk is about to face the reality that actually when you sort of have an aspiring autocrat like Trump who is willing to exploit power to protect his friends, he's also just as easily able to use that power to exploit it to actually go after his enemies. So I think, Trump has already suggested that he will do that, potentially cancelling his government contracts. So I think Elon Musk has ultimately played a very dangerous game here in getting involved with someone like Trump, who ultimately has to personalize every relationship that he has, which is great if you're getting on with them and catastrophic if you don't.
In terms of what's the relationship and the synergies between the two and their working relationship, was speaking to with the direction of US politics, really. What does the breakup mean more widely? I mean, there's been a lot written about what it might mean for the tech sector and how that honeymoon is over, and we've seen share prices responding accordingly. But what does it mean more widely for the political landscape and the American electorate, but I suppose also for global politics?
Well, you're absolutely right. Of course, it has major personal consequence for both of them, but of course, they are both immensely powerful, well-resourced, and ultimately egotistical individuals, which means that actually there's a risk of contagion for this into kind of public policy, but also in business interest as well. In terms of the impact on American politics, I would say it's going to be quite unpredictable, but I would say that I think that Elon Musk's influence within the Republican Party is going to be, quite diminished, just largely due to the fact that it was quite dependent upon his association with Donald Trump. But of course, we already know there are still Republican congressmen who are still, and women who are still quite concerned just due to the fact that Elon Musk is the richest person in the world. And actually his influence in terms of elections and financing could actually still have an implication. But I think in terms of global implications, it could be very significant. I think due to the fact that actually Elon Musk's business interests are going to be suddenly exposed in a way in which they haven't been really since Donald Trump became elected. We know for a fact that the White House under Donald Trump has kind of pressured the British government and European governments to try to avoid any kind of regulatory action against social media companies like X. But given the fact that that's unlikely to continue, I think that really brings Elon Musk's X business into kind of exposure in the way in which it wasn't before. And so I think, you are going to quite rightly see some action probably in the medium term against X now that it's no longer, really protected, which I think ultimately is a very good thing, because I think Elon Musk has been using X to deliberately destabilize democracies, and we saw the effects of it last summer in the UK. So I think ultimately this does have very big global implications as well.
He could also use it for a platform to launch a new party, couldn't he? Which is something that he has mooted. Do you think if he were to do that, it would gain any traction?
I think it's very unlikely, to be honest. I think this is a bit of a gimmick, perhaps a bit of a leverage that he's trying to use the threat of creating a new party against Trump. I think he's trying to present this new party, I think that he calls the American Party, which he says would focus on the 80% of people in the middle. He's trying to sort of brand it that way. But I think in reality, Elon Musk has found himself quite isolated in politics. He used to be considered a Democrat, then he moved to sort of the center, and now he's kind of shifting away from where he was, which was sort of on the hard right of American politics. So I think, he's really finds himself quite politically isolated. And I think if you are moving from either side of the political spectrum in such a short amount of time, ultimately that destroys your credibility and your authenticity. So I think this is not something that's going to affect American politics, particularly because, like the UK, American politics is very rigid in terms of its two-party system, ultimately because it has very similar first-past-the-post systems than we do. So I think it's more of a threat than an actual consequence that we will see laid out.
A big political test for the president will be whether he can get his big, beautiful bill accepted. I think the Senate is where it's looking, a little precarious, perhaps. Meanwhile, what are the Democrats doing to try and get their house in order? I mean, they must be licking their wounds from the election. They've still got, it sounds like a long time, doesn't it, till 2028 to put forward a credible candidate for that. Who are the runners and riders that are sort of being groomed, do you think, for that potential position?
Well, I think the Democrats are in a very weak position. Unfortunately, they don't have much power because ultimately they're in a minority in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, and so ultimately they are forced into trying to take different tactics than they might use if they were in a different position. Of course, we still have about a year and a half until the midterms when the Democrats could potentially change the equation in Congress. But really, we saw the Democrats' House Leader Hakeem Jeffries give a press conference yesterday when he was really trying to sort of ride almost on the kind of spirit of the what's happened within the Republican Party to do with the breakup between Trump and Musk, to try to kind of create that fracturing, to bring those kind of tensions forward, particularly with senators. So I think ultimately we're going to see more of that from the Democrats. But I think really Democrats are still kind of in a soul-searching period where they've had a catastrophic defeat, both legislatively but also for the presidency in the election last year. And so I think they're still trying to find their direction in terms of leadership, but also in policy as well. And we've seen, Bernie Sanders and AOC and others trying to bring the party more from the kind of left. We've also seen kind of more centrists trying to re-establish that kind of position. So I think we're going to see a huge amount of, also conflict within the Democratic Party themselves. And ultimately they are, reduced to trying to use kind of legislative, quirks and gimmicks to try to break apart this Republican control of Congress.
Adam, always good to talk to you on Sky News. Thanks for your time.